and welcome to another episode of the Pitch Side Podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the PSP. Like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course. Enable notifications to always receive the updates from these episodes and the recaps of the day that we upload here on the channel. Follow us on social media. The usernames are on the screen and the links are in the description, of course, to help us grow as well. Listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform, and join us always on the way to 2K. Thanks for listening and watching, and welcome. We kick things off from England, and it was the Carabao Cup action in England. Of course, the semi-final was in place. It was Chelsea versus Spurs at the Stamford Bridge. The other semi-final, of course, before we kick off, is Arsenal-Liverpool, and was postponed, of course, because the COVID cases growing in the Liverpool squad, which means that the matches were pushed away by a week. The first leg is going to be on 13th of January, and the second leg is going to be on the 20th of January. Chelsea defeated Tottenham 2-0. The game was pretty two halves. I'm not going to say a game of two halves because that's going to be too much, but I think there's going to be a difference between the first and the second. Both sides played the 3-4-3 on paper. Lukaku was starting for Chelsea. He came down from the naughty step finally with Thomas Tuchel after the interview that was released for him last week and the whole debacle that it caused. Finally, after the clear the air meeting that we talked about in the recap of the day yesterday, he starts for Chelsea. And Chelsea's plan really was pretty simple. It was stretch Spurs open, try and move them around, create spaces in the middle. That's what they did, especially down that left-hand side of the attack, where there is Emerson Royal as a right back for Tottenham and a right wing back. And they succeeded, really. From the first try, Davinson Sanchez helped the ball from Kai Havertz get inside 5 minutes, and I think the whole plan for Spurs was changed and ripped apart at that moment, of course, after the intricate setup down that left-hand flank. Spurs couldn't really string any decent amount of possession, particularly in the first half. Chelsea were very tight, very intense in their pressing. Saul had a really, really good game, in particular, him and Jorginho in the middle, but I think Saul really, really stood out in this one. Chelsea didn't allow the likes of Son, Harry Kane and Lucas Moura. The three of them were pretty tame in the game. I think in certain degrees Moura was probably the better out of the three. Like, if you want to pick from the worst, probably Moura is the least worst. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but still. Tottenham sat deeper as the half grew on, and Chelsea really had more of the ball and little to no pressure almost from Spurs. Nothing really happening in the final third from Conte's side, and Chelsea were really intense in their pressure. They didn't allow Tottenham to do any sort of meaningful attack or transition forward. Again, the midfield in particular was amazing from Chelsea against a static counterpart from Tottenham, and in the 35th minute, another lucky goal for Chelsea, but I think they deserved it, to be fair, on their performances in the first half. Ball ricochets off Tanganga and off Ben Davies. It goes into the net for 2-0 inside 35 minutes. The second half was better from Spurs. At least it was a good start. The introduction of Ndombele added much needed energy to the midfield, albeit it wasn't enough, really. They had only one meaningful opportunity, to be fair, for the whole half, despite slightly being better, quicker in transition, but I think the final touch was always missing. I think aside from the Harry Kane free kick early on that was saved by Kepa, there was really just speculative attempts from Conte's boys. He made the substitutions. I mean, Son was substituted in the end for Brian Schill, who I thought probably should have started in this one. He was very lively. He could have been a good option as a wing-back if you want to play 3-4-3 in the middle. He's very, very effective. I thought it was very vital. He created probably Tottenham's only dangerous chance from open play in the game when he cut back and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg almost scored, but Kepa saved it. Generally, Chelsea played better. They deserved to win. They were the more dangerous side. They were the better side, I would say. They definitely created more opportunities than Spurs. In the second half, they dropped expectedly. Don't expect a team to press for 90 minutes or to stay on the press for 90 minutes. They dropped back. They didn't allow Tottenham a lot in the final third, despite dropping back. They were pretty compact when needed to. I think Malang Sarr and Rudiger had a good game at the back. So Saul, in my opinion, stood out. Probably I would say the best player of Chelsea. I mean, the goals were not scored by players of Chelsea; they were scored by Davinson Sanchez and Ben Davies, and that is not And that, I mean, is lucky for Chelsea, but also it signifies the continuation of the attacking problem for Thomas Tuchel. Still looking for some harmony in the attack, still looking for some driving force in that attack. Lukaku, he was back, he tried, I mean, he gave it all of his heart, but he couldn't really score. He had a couple of opportunities, but never something meaningful overall. 2-0, I think it gives Chelsea a bit of advantage, a lot of advantage, I would say, heading into the second leg. Tottenham might have to do a miracle if they want to turn things around at their stadium and go through to the final, but definitely it's going to be an exciting game anyway. We will see how Tottenham will try and make things work in the next game. Now it's the 9th game in a row in all competitions that Tottenham cannot beat Chelsea, and it seems to be a big complex now for Spurs to beat Chelsea. So Conte's return to to Stamford Bridge was not exactly successful for him. Moving on to the Lukaku situation, of course. Definitely interesting because he started in that game against Spurs. If you've been living under a rock for the last, 10 days, 15 days, you probably didn't know that an interview was released for Romelu Lukaku on Sky Italia. Obviously, the interview is pretty old. It was supposedly, according to Lukaku himself, meant to be a salutation for Inter Milan, some sort of goodbye for the Inter Milan fans, and maybe a thank you for their support. I don't know what it was, but it created a lot of criticism. It created a big storm in the English media. The tabloids wrote a lot of articles about it. The pundits, everybody chimed in. The coaches. It created a lot of talking points, I think, from a lot of perspectives. Definitely, what Lukaku said didn't help his case. I mean, some of the things he said, I wouldn't really say if it was a professional player. I mean, saying that he missed Inter pretty much, and that he's not happy at Chelsea, and that Thomas Tuchel should improve his work at the club. I mean, yeah, surely it's good for the players to have an opinion and not be exactly totally controlled by their clubs and coaches, but also the way that it was framed, the way probably it was translated as well, it definitely made for an interesting situation for Lukaku and for Chelsea, so much so that he had to do an apology later on, and he had to explain the whole situation. He had to say he didn't mean it, he didn't mean to upset the fans, and he apologized to everyone, to the board, to Thomas Tuchel, of course, to the players as well, because that is surely going to create some fracas in the squad. It was interesting. It was an interesting debate. A lot of people had various opinions. Some said Lukaku should be fined. Some said Lukaku probably should be kicked off the club. There are some certain discussions even about him leaving the club altogether. In this transfer window, which is, again, I think it's bonkers for someone who they bought for 115 million euros, supposedly to be a prime striker. The whole fact that he didn't play against Liverpool, it was a controversial decision, but I think understandable, because if you're going to set a disciplinary record, if you're going to set a disciplinary example in the club, I think Thomas Tuchel should have dropped him, and he did drop him, to set a good example for the players to not maybe go overboard in the interviews. Albeit, again, it was an interview a month old when it was released, and at the time Lukaku was not exactly hitting all cylinders. It was an injury layoff, after that a COVID layoff as well for him, and he returned, and he actually scored since then a couple of games against Aston Villa and Brighton, and he did really well. He improved himself a lot, but it's just the fact that nobody really seemed to understand why the interview was released, why he was saying what he's saying things like, I was thinking of Barcelona, Real Madrid and Bayern, and it ended up at Chelsea, is kind of the thing you want to say when you want to shoot yourself in the foot. But overall, the situation, I think, was sort of forgotten, or at least gone, but not forgotten. The air was cleared between Thomas Tuchel and Lukaku, which is good. And the only thing that the fans are expecting at the moment is Lukaku to return back to performing again, and back to scoring again, which they need if they want to mount a title challenge, if they want to keep themselves in a title race, because of course they have games coming up that are very important, and the most important of the ones is going to be against City on January 16th in the league for probably a last chance at surviving in that title race, the last chance of reviving their hopes in a title challenge in the Premier League. Serie A returns to action this Thursday, of course. At the moment of recording, actually only 7 matches are going to be played. 3 are going to be postponed, of course. Let's run through the whole rundown of the card for Serie A's return, of course, this Thursday. Bologna kicks off things against Inter Milan, the champions and the top of the table at the moment. Sampdoria face Cagliari as well on 12:30. Lazio face Empoli, Spezia, Hellas Verona. Atalanta was supposed to face Torino at 4:30, but that match got postponed. Sassuolo Genoa at 4:30 as well. Milan Roma is still on. We're going to be talking about it, of course. Salernitana Venezia on 6:30 was postponed as well. Fiorentina Udinese was postponed, and the big main event, let's say, of the evening, Juventus Napoli, is still on, of course, in the Serie A. Speaking of those games, of course, the two, let's say, big showcases that people are going to be focusing on in Serie A this week is definitely Milan Roma and Juventus Napoli. Let's get off with Milan Roma. Milan's form heading into this game is probably not the best. I mean, losing 3 out of the last 7, including a massive head-to-head game at the top of the table against Napoli. And albeit they recovered by defeating Empoli in the last game of 2021, staying 4 points behind Inter Milan, it's a very reachable distance, I would say. Instead of maybe 7 and 8 points, what could have been if their form has been worse. Also, maybe another positive for them in this game that they don't have much of an injury worry. I mean, the biggest first team name missing is Simon Kjaer, who's still going to be long. The other injuries, Blizzari, Tataruciano, and Pellegrini, are not exactly first teamers. Pellegrini in particular, particularly featured for a couple of games last year, Pellegrini, when the whole squad was pretty depleted. But definitely, this game is going to be probably a full squad for Milan in general, so they have a full squad to pick from, which is good as well. They had a good start for the season, and their form dipped slightly. Particularly when the Champions League got heated, I thought they couldn't really deal with the pressure of that competition, returning to it after long absence. Of course, the group was tough in its own right. Liverpool, Atletico Madrid, and Porto. A couple of decisions that went probably against them, that changed the course of the group. You look at the game against Atletico Madrid in San Siro, where they could have probably won and should have won, to be fair, but Atletico Madrid got what let's call a very, very controversial penalty at the end of the game to give them the win. So once the Champions League kicked off, and once the season got really heated for Milan, and they had to play on a couple of big fronts, and they have to stretch their squad and rotate, and their squad was depleted, it took its toll on them, and they felt really, really deflated at certain games, and mainly the Liverpool one where they could have won, and Liverpool playing by the second string of players, but Milan couldn't take advantage of that as well. So probably it'd be better for them to not have European action for the rest of the season. Maybe it will be a really good sort of motive to stay in the league and to maybe mount a title challenge for Inter, who are still, of course, in the Champions League. You can't really say the same thing for Roma, though, who have been, topsy-turvy as far as their form is concerned under Mourinho. A mixture of result that doesn't really give a clear image, I would say, of what Roma was. Like, they had some good results at the beginning. We thought they were going to be close, maybe around the top 4 and stuff like that, but definitely they sort of have fallen off a bit of a cliff as of late. The fact is, they still have European football on their menu. They're still in the in the lower tier of the European competitions. Yes, the European Conference League, but definitely, even in that competition, they found ways to perform badly. Of course, losing 6-1 to Bodo Glimt, being actually second in a group where they should have been first. But definitely they won't try to remember that. Of course, they're trying to focus on their own work. They are 6th at the moment. They're behind Juventus. And I would argue that Juventus have been even worse than them. We'll get to them in a minute. But definitely, Roma didn't really show a clear image for themselves. They have a couple of injuries as well. El Shaarawy, Mayoral, and of course, long-term absentee Spinazzola, who might return late in the season. Probably something like early February, maybe late February, who knows. So, overall, I think both sides, we could discuss, I'm not going to say contrasting form, but I think different from one another. Milan's form is pretty good against Roma. They won 5 out of the last 10 against them, with, of course, 2 draws and 3 victories for Roma. Roma's last win at San Siro dating back to October 2017. it's going to be a big game. Roma, of course, have a big chance if they win to overleap Juventus, at least momentarily, before the game against Napoli late on at the day, which transitions us nicely to that game, which comes at a critical point, I think, for both sides in particular. Juventus are 5 points behind Napoli, 4 behind Atalanta, of course. I mean, they're not going to overleap anyone if they win, but at least they're going to give themselves a very good chance of, getting close to the top 4, and, of course, improving that situation from the start of the season. They have a very good recent form, I think, for Juve. 1 loss, 1 draw, and 6 wins out of the last 8, of course. Definitely struggle to convince anyone that they are title material or they are a very good performance side. The fact is they top the Champions League group, which is a surprise in its own right, but that's more because of Chelsea dropping points against Zenit on the final match day, so it's definitely probably not Juventus's work in its own right. Also, you feel that Juve, they need some fresh blood. I mean, there's a lot of talk about players leaving that club. A lot of players linked with a move. You have the likes of Dybala, of course, Aaron Ramsey's been linked to Newcastle. Morata's been linked to Barcelona heavily. That move might fall through, but it's still pretty heavily rumored that Morata is going to be leaving. Allegri, I think, is pretty adamant that he wants to keep him. He lost Ronaldo in the summer, so he doesn't have another proper striker in his squad. I mean, Moise Kean may do the job, but he's not exactly the first choice for that position. So generally, you don't feel that Juventus are title material, let alone top 4 material sometimes at certain points of the season, early on in particular, where they had that spell where they were in 12th and 10th place. I mean, people were expecting, I think, a disastrous campaign from them. I mean, it's still pretty disastrous by the standards they set over the last 8-9 years, really, before losing the title to Inter. They set the standards for themselves, and now they're falling off that standard pretty big. They are having missing some players, of course. Aaron Ramsey, we spoke about, is missing. Chiellini, Danilo, and Arthur. For this, of course, Bonucci is a doubt. So, definitely they have their worries as well in the lineup. We'll see how they go. Of course, they lost a reverse fixture against Napoli 2-1. And speaking of the Napolitano side, on the other side of that coin, they started the season very well. 11 straight wins. Seemingly were set for a title challenging season. And a very good season. They could still challenge for the title. They could still do it. I mean, it's not the end of the world. They could still challenge for the title. They could still catch up to Inter and Milan. It's not that far. But also, they've fallen off a cliff as well. Only 2 wins in the last 8. 4 losses. And it's miraculous to think that they're only 7 points behind Inter. This is what Milan should have been into. But Napoli's performance is worse even. I mean, they had a lot of injuries as well. They felt that they had a depleted squad at certain points of the season as well. Namely, the likes of Victor Osimhen missing because of COVID. Of course, they missed a lot of players throughout the season. Marco Rui, Kevin Marcui. They missed LG Elmas is out for this one as well. So it's definitely an interesting situation for Napoli. Seeing them how they're going to be, performing, and we'll see how they're going to be starting the new year, of course, as well. Is it going to be a good start? Is there going to be a victory against Juventus, which is going to obviously take them to 4 points behind Inter? Momentarily, if they defeated Bologna, Inter Milan is going to be 7 potentially. So, it will be always interesting to see how Napoli will start this year. The end for last year for them was not that good. Again, although a good thing, I think, for them that they don't have a lot of players joining AFCON, so that squad is not going to be exactly depleted. You have Zambo and Geese, of course, going to the squad in the middle. Koulibaly, I mean, it's a big loss, Koulibaly, to be fair, but you would think they have enough in them to replace. At the moment, they don't have exactly the most depleted of squad. Now, the guaranteed thing that will be a good game, and it's going to be a really intense and exciting situation, as it is the game between them in the last few years. Obviously, the victory in the reverse fixture doesn't mean anything, because I think Juve are different, question mark, from the last time they met. But I think Napoli might have needed the victory just because of the dip in form that they are experiencing if they want to keep up with the top 2, if they want to keep in the title race, quote-unquote, in Serie A. Some Copa del Rey action in Spain, of course. Yesterday was the round of 16, or the third round, from said competition, of course. And no big real surprises. Probably the only one is Celta Vigo being eliminated by third-tier side Atletico Linares. Aside from that, nothing really massive happened. Mallorca qualified against Eibar 2-1. Valencia defeated Cartagena from second division 2-1 as well. Sociedad defeated Leganes 3-2. Barcelona had a bit of a scare against Linares Deportivo. It was a scary hour, really. They lost lost the lead inside 18 minutes. They were trailing for almost 50-60 minutes until Ousmane Dembele equalised, and then Ferran Jutla managed to bring in the second goal to keep them in the competition that they won, of course, defending champions Barcelona. As you mentioned, Atletico Linares defeating Celta Vigo, the only big surprise, I would say, of the competition of that round. Nothing else. Mirandes lost to Rayo Vallecano 1-0. Real Valladolid were eliminated by Real Betis 3-0. And in the main event, it was a bit of a PTSD experience for Real Madrid. They took the lead thanks to Eder Militao, the same man who gave them the lead in the last time out. They faced each other, of course, last year when they were eliminated by Alcoyano. Alcoyano played a really, really good game, I would say. Credit to them for having the guts to go at Real Madrid, to play really, really well, and equalised, of course, in the 66th minute. Beautifully worked goal, by the way, from Daniel Vega. It was wonderfully set up by Ghezwani, and definitely it was a good game from Alcoyano. Very valiant performance from them, but in the end, a couple of, I would say, very lucky goals. Asensio with a deflection from the defender in the 76th minute. In the 78th minute, it was Isco as a substitute coming in and scoring the third goal, and thus sparing Real Madrid another painful experience in Alcoyano as well. Shout out to Alcoyano, of course, for their very, very valiant performance. So Real Madrid we're going to be waiting, of course, to see who's going to be their opponent. The draw is going to be on Friday, as far as Copa del Rey is concerned, but definitely still action on Thursday in that competition. Fuenlabrada face Cadiz, Girona face Osasuna, Zaragoza face Sevilla, Sporting Gijón hosts Villarreal, Atlético Mancha, Real hosts Athletic Club, Almería hosts Elche, and Rayo Majadahonda hosting Atletico Madrid in the rest of games from that round. From a league that returns on Thursday to a league that's going to be returning on Friday to the Bundesliga, of course, as Bayern Munich kick things off and kick round 18 of the season against Borussia Mönchengladbach on Friday. At least for the moment, the game is going on. I mean, it's always interesting to see how things will develop, but the squad is pretty depleted for Bayern Munich at the moment. COVID has been hitting that squad hard. The likes of Neuer, Upamecano, Leroy Sané, Alphonso Davies, Kingsley Coman, Buda Sarr, Corentin Tolisso, all rumoured to have positive tests. In general, more positive tests might come out. Obviously, it's a big worry for Bayern Munich at the moment. At least Kimmich and Goretzka returned, as far as Bayern are concerned, but definitely the fact that there's a lot of COVID cases and the squad is going to be pretty depleted for this one is definitely not the best of cases for Bayern Munich. Let's run down the card actually for round 18 of the Bundesliga. First, Bayern München versus Borussia Mönchengladbach, as you mentioned, on Friday. On Saturday, it is Hoffenheim versus Augsburg, Bayer Leverkusen, Union Berlin, Leipzig versus Mainz, Freiburg versus Arminia Bielefeld, Greuther Fürth versus Stuttgart, and Eintracht Frankfurt versus Borussia Dortmund. That's a really very, very, very important and very interesting game to watch as well. Eintracht Frankfurt versus Borussia Dortmund, Hertha Berlin versus Köln on Sunday, and VfL Bochum versus Wolfsburg on Sunday as well. Back to the Bayern point. The game, of course, is still up in the air, as I mentioned. The Bayern probably going to be still reporting maybe new positive cases. Of course, testing is going to be every day. There was limited training. I mean, only a handful of players really trained. 12 players are available at the moment, as far as first squad is concerned. Probably Bayern are going to be relying on their youth academy. I mean, for the bench, it's going to be really, really weird to see a lot of the players and a lot of the names that probably I don't know, a lot of people do not know from the Bayern academy. It's up in the air if this game goes on or not. But certainly as far as the game itself, I mean, it's a big one. Bayern, I think, need to be victorious on this one, not because it's the start of the year, not because it's the return of the Bundesliga, but also on a more of a personal note, quote unquote. Try and get the better of Borussia Mönchengladbach. They seem to have the better of them this season. 1-1 draw in the first fixture, and a 5-0 dropping, of course, in the cup. So from Bayern Munich point of view, they need this game. I think they need this game big to get a good start to the new year. Maybe expand the gap between them and the chasing pack even more. It's already at 9 points now. Maybe they're close to the league. Who knows? Dortmund, the closest thing to them, are 34 points. So we might really give up the title race in Germany altogether pretty soon. Eintracht Frankfurt, Borussia Dortmund is probably the most important other game aside from that, but more because of Dortmund's need for a win. I think every game Dortmund will play in is a must-win in my opinion. Of course. They need to make the best results that they can. They're on the Europa League already now. They can't really allow themselves to drop extra points and get even worse results in the second half of the season. They need to have the best start possible to the new year as well. It wasn't a good end to the year for them as well. They lost to Hertha Berlin in the last time out, so they have to refocus. They have to fix their form heading into the new year, and definitely try and create more of a harmony with the side at the moment as well. Of course, there's a lot of questions hanging around Borussia Dortmund, mainly the future of Erling Haaland, who's been really up in the balance as of late. Of course, whether they will be out of that competition, whether they'll be, losing Haaland in the summer. Who knows? It's going to be really interesting, as we mentioned. Hopefully it's going to be a great return for the Bundesliga, and hopefully all the games go through without a hitch. That is my personal wish for this one. Something else returns this weekend, or start this weekend, of course, is the African Cup of Nations, the AFCON. And I wanted to throw some quick words really about this competition, because I felt that something should be addressed as far as this tournament is concerned. First of all, Africa deserves to have this tournament. The sort of European media, mainly the English media, the way they dealt with this is not good. It's not good at all. I mean, definitely it's a controversial edition. I mean, out of all the editions that have been witnessed to, I think this might be the most controversial, of course, coming at a hard time. COVID is still pretty rough on the world at the moment. So many threats, I think, in this competition. There's been rumours that the stadiums are not ready. Rumours about terrorists in Cameroon, secessionists at least in some states in that country. COVID is still pretty taken over. There were reports that vaccination rates are 10% in that country, which is very, very low. But also, still, amongst all of that, I needed to shout out Samuel Eto'o, the of course legend in football world, but now the president of the Cameroonian FA, who did a wonderful job, I think, standing for that competition, because FIFA were pressing him so hard to move that competition to 2023, or at least push it, I don't know, to the summer, something like that. They tried hard, but of course he's been very adamant that the competition and the tournament will be held in its own allotted time slot from the 9th of January to the 3rd of February, of course, kicking off on Sunday. Good luck for Tunisia, of course, in that one. It's a tough group. We have Mali, Mauritania, and Gambia, but still, I believe we could go through. We could go the distance. Definitely an interesting situation because, as I mentioned, the way the media dealt with this competition, they're complaining about players going to that tournament. I mean, genuinely, why people do not care about the AFCON like they do Copa America or the Euros, why they don't pay much attention to that competition, despite the fact that the African superstars are in all the big leagues at the moment, and the biggest clubs in the world rely on African clubs. I mean, look no further than the Premier League, and look how many teams are going to be damaged, really, with the absence of their African players. Mainly Liverpool, I think, on the top of the list. Salah and Mane, 80% of the attacking prowess and power for Liverpool is now going to be gone for potentially a month for both. We don't know about the situation with Egypt and Senegal, how far they're going to go, but momentarily, they're gone. They're going to be missing them at least for 2 straight games for sure in the Premier League, if not more. So definitely, it's an interesting debate to be had. But overall, I think this competition deserves to be organised. We Africans deserve to have this competition. The way media has been dealing with this has been disgraceful at certain points. The complaints from coaches, the complaints from some players even. I mean, it was interesting to see the support of some European players of that idea as well. I mean, Ian Wright went out and really, I think, agreed with my opinion on the fact that this competition is important. And yes, our continent deserves it. It's everything for us. And as I mentioned, it's a competition that is full of superstars, so why the media is not exactly covering it the way it should be covered, nobody knows really. But again, thanks to Samuel Eto'o for standing for Africa, for really making Africa have a good and strong stand in this situation, of course. There's a whole other problems about this competition, of course, or around the African football in general, the representation in the World Cup, the right to organise the World Cup more, a bit of a share of the earnings. I mean, there's a lot of debates that could be had, but it's not that moment. The good thing is that the competition is going to go through, hopefully without a hitch. But definitely, there will be some concern over some situations there in terms of the health, also the logistics in that competition, and certainly the security threats in some states, particularly in Limbe, where the Tunisian team is going to have their matches for the group. So it's interesting, but also concerning. I'm happy, but I have some conflicted feelings about this competition. I'm worried something disastrous could happen, but I will keep that feeling till later, and I will really hide that feeling down anyway. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching. That's it for the episode. I was with HD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube video. Of course, listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform, and follow us on social media. The usernames are on the screen and the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.